But if you're interested in purchasing a copy of this, you can do so on Amazon, or you can go on pcg.org. There's also information on ordering it on our Facebook site. So if you go out there, there's information how you can order one. You can do a number of things. You can all Zoom, just follow from home. You can get together at your church while we do the Bible studies, or you can do it at a home. And I think I actually
And have snakes.
And have snakes. I said snakes on one of the Facebook post I did, and please don't get snakes. You can get snacks instead. But you can enjoy those. But let me tell you about some things that we're doing with Empowered Women's Ministry. So every woman that is a director, women's director at their church will be receiving a book. It's a directory, and it has all the information about Empowered Women's Ministry. And so you are going to get one of these. Every church will get one. If you need more than one, if you have a couple of ladies that are doing ministry together and you need more than one of these, just let us know. We'll make sure to provide them. But we will be sending one to every church. It's got all of our dates, everything that we're doing for the year. And I wanted to share a little bit about what we're doing this year. So we are doing a tour of Kentucky this year. So Empowered Women's Ministry is coming to you. We're coming out to your region. March 11th, we're coming to the North Central region, and we're going to be in Georgetown, which is Victory Tabernacle. The Western region meeting will be in Madisonville on April 15th. I think I got one of these dates wrong, but I will get back with you and make sure I post them right. Western region will be at Madisonville. And then we have an Eastern region, which will be in Flatwoods, and the Central region meeting will be in Lawrenceburg. And I will publish all those dates out on our Facebook site so that you will have them. They're going to be a luncheon, and we're going to have some fun activities that we do. We're going to give away door prizes. And I'm going to come and speak to you. And our theme is Redeemed. So make plans when I get those dates out to you. Make plans to join us. We really want to connect the ladies all across the state with the district. Now, there is a $7 charge to cover your food if you're a registered woman. If you're not registered, it will be a $10 charge to help cover food and the expenses for these meetings. We also will be having an Empowered Women's Ministries Redeemed Conference September 14th through the 16th. And I just got confirmation this week. Okay. Megan Hall is going to be our speaker for that conference. So we're very excited. And we're going to be going to the western part of the state. We're going to be going to Ken Lake State Resort Park. We went to Lake Cumberland State Resort Park. And I think we're going to have just as good a time at Ken Lake. They have similar facilities, but we're real excited about that. And speaking of registration, now is the time to register. Donna Lancaster has sent out registration forms to all of the churches. So if you haven't been hit up about registration, talk to your women's ministries director or your pastor's wife. She has sent it out to all the leaders in the church. And registration for Empowered Women's Ministries for Kentucky District is $10. $1 will stay there with your local ministry to support the local ministry and help you do things. $3 of that registration will go to our national office to help support activities and things that they do. One of the things that they've done is they publish these wonderful devotionals. There's also some free resources on the site. Check that out on pcg.org and go to the women's page. There's lots of good things there. Go to the resources tab. And the remainder, $6, stays with the district in order for us to be able to host programs like the conference, like this Bible study, like the tour of Kentucky. So all those good things that we're able to do and bring ministry out to everyone. So I encourage you, get registered, get registered, get registered. And we're real excited about that. So I'm not going to delay too much on. Oh, one thing I almost forgot. So if you are on the Zoom meeting, there is a little section in the Zoom, and it's the chat box. So if you click on the chat box, if you are in the meeting and you click on the chat, if you would please put in your name to enter yourself for a drawing for a devotional. We're going to draw one name at the end of this. Bethany Norvell is our moderator. She's watching for comments there. So put your name in the chat, just type your name in, and for a chance to win a redeemed devotional. So, and we will mail that to you once we've called those names out. So Bethany is going to get that together and we're going to draw live. So we're going to move on. And I want to introduce, for anyone who doesn't know, Becky Norvell. Becky Norvell is going to be hosting our Bible studies through this next 12 months. She grew up in Arkansas. She has been in the Pentecostal Church of God her whole life. She also attended Messenger College, which is our national college it's now in Bedford, Texas. I believe it was in
Joplin.
Joplin when you attended. Yes. She and her husband, Jason, also served as the DYDs for Southwest Texas. They served as youth pastors at several churches.
For 22 years.
So they have a lot. She's been in ministry almost all of her life in some sort or the other. She did serve as her and Jason served as youth pastors here at Cross Point Church. Her children, Bethany and Jackson, both attended. Jackson's actually attending. Bethany graduated from Messenger College. So Becky is very familiar with Pentecostal Church of God. Still serves in a variety of capacities, whatever we ask her to do. Last year, I was like, oh, can you help decorate for this conference? And she was so gracious as to say yes. So I do really appreciate that. She has a heart for God. She professionally is a cosmetologist. So if you need your hair done or cut, like all of us ladies do, and you don't have a hairdresser, she's the one to call. She works here at JC Studios in Versailles. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I had to go home after work today and make sure I looked presentable. I was very honored and humbled when Teresa texted me and asked if I would like to lead this Bible study. I was like, sure. I am. In January of 2020, my mom was hosting a ladies' Bible study at her home, and I had gone to the store with her. We were going to the Bible bookstore for her to look for a new study for the ladies, and I helped her pick one out, and then we're standing there in the checkout line, and she says, by the way, you're teaching this one. I was like, yeah, right. And I did. And then right before we were getting ready to do our last lesson for that study, COVID shut everything down. But the study we were doing was called Anxious for Nothing. And I thought, what a better study to do at that time. So I called Pastor Brian and I said, would you mind if I started a Zoom Bible study? So he said, sure, go for it. And since then, we had been doing studies up until September, I think it was, of this year. And then Bethany's health journey kind of took its toll on all of us. So I kind of stepped back from that. So to be able to do this again is definitely an honor. And I got the book and started reading. And the first thing that jumped out at me was, this is about her story. And I love stories. My favorite hobby in the world is to get lost in a good book, especially if it's like a historical fiction. Some of my favorite authors are Jeanette Oke or Lorraine Snelling. I just love those types of books. As a matter of fact, sometimes I can even catch myself getting so caught up in those stories. I'll be out in town and I'll see somebody. I'm like, ooh, that's so-and-so from that book. And then I'm like, that can't be that person from that book because that person is not real. But I just get so involved in the characters, I see them in real life. And my Aunt Teresa, some of y'all may know her, may have known her. She is one of the world's best storytellers. She can hold your attention for hours, and she can have you doubled over in laughter 1 minute and then wiping tears from your eyes just from the emotional story that she's telling. But the common thing that each one of those stories had are a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we all have a story. And like the stories that my Aunt Teresa would tell, our stories also have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Another common thing about our stories is God's writing our story. And since we're all still here and we're all still breathing, we're not at the end of our story yet. So there's still more to go. And everybody's story is different. Just like we are all unique people, our stories are all unique. And I would love to hear all of your stories one day, either through this study or if we ever get together and share, I would love to hear your story. And I hope through this study, you're going to get to hear more of my story. Teresa gave just a brief synopsis of part of our story, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that too throughout the next year. And during this next year, we're going to dive deeper into the stories of 12 women that God used for a purpose. And through those 12 women, God showed his redemptive power. Through this study, I hope that you can discover how God is showing his redemptive power in your story, not just the stories from the Bible, but in your personal story. And so I talked about how I love stories. Well, the second part of this that jumped out at me was redeemed. And I am a big fan of Merriam-Webster. I look up the definition of words all the time. And so I looked up the definition for redeemed, and I discovered that it actually has several meanings. I wrote down 5 of them. One of them is to buy back, to free from what distresses or harms you, to change for the better, to repair or restore, or to atone for. And then I read just a little bit further down the page and looked up the synonyms for redeemed. And those are repurchase, ransom, reform, rescue, reclaim, and deliver. So try to keep those words in your mind as we're going through this study together. See if you can identify how God is redeeming each one of these women that we're studying. The first story of redemption that we're going to look at is Esther. And Esther's story actually begins with tragedy, because we see that she has been left an orphan at a very young age. And she and other Jews had been exiled away from their homeland because they were practicing idolatry and they were disobeying God. Now, the chances that Esther, being at a young age, was actually participating in this is probably pretty slim. But like we've all learned throughout life, sometimes we have to suffer the consequences of other people's choices. So because she was Jewish and the Jewish people were doing these things, she too was being exiled to a land that she knew nothing about, really. She was being raised by her cousin Mordecai, and she was kind of having to hide her identity because she didn't want the other people there to know that she was a Jew and then to be mistreated. And if we look at that, we would consider those to be disadvantages, negative things that happen in our lives. And I'm sure at some point in all of our lives, we have felt disadvantaged. I know I have. Those can be things from your upbringing, or it can be things from your past, or even current situations that make you see these disadvantages. And they can be at work. You can see disadvantages at home, in your ministries, in your everyday life. And you may feel that these disadvantages are disqualifying you from God's favor and keeping you from fulfilling the purpose that God has for your life. So think back. Can you think of things that make you feel at a disadvantage? I'm going to share total transparency and share some of the things that make me feel disadvantaged in some things. First of all, I did not start my career as a cosmetologist until I was in my late 30s. So here I am going to school with all these 18-year-olds fresh out of high school, And here I am 39 years old, and they were all asking me, why do you study all the time? It's like, well, my brain is not 18 years old anymore, and it takes a whole lot for that stuff to get stuck in there. So, I was at a disadvantage there. And then sometimes I've felt at a disadvantage, like I was in someone else's shadow. For all of you that know my husband, Jason, you know that he has a very big personality. I do not. I am more introverted. I do not feed off of being loud and in front of people the way that he does. So sometimes I felt, like I wasn't being heard, or I wasn't able to do some of the things that I really wanted to do, especially in ministry. No, I'm not knocking him. God called him to do his thing and he was doing it. But sometimes I I felt pushed to the background. And then lastly, I am very insecure. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. I get nervous being in front of people. I always want people to like me. I don't like to make people mad. I don't like confrontation. Like I said, I'm introverted. I'm insecure. Just let me do my thing. I'll let you do your thing.
And so I asked her to come and possibly be in front of however many people.
Doing this with a group of women from the church is one thing, 15 people maybe. And then for the whole district, that was a whole nother ball game, but God's helping me. So here's the good thing though about disadvantages. They don't disqualify you in Christ. And God can actually take those disadvantages and use them for our good and for his glory. And our identity isn't about our disadvantages. It's not about our upbringing or our past, because we know that God had a plan for Esther long before any of those negative things occurred in her life. And the same is true for us. God has a plan and a purpose for us. Jeremiah 1:5, it actually says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. So before you were even born, God knew about all the good things and the bad things that were going to happen in your life. And then he has used those to shape you into the person that you are today. So your identity wasn't in those circumstances. Your identity is in Christ. And like I said, God takes those bad things and he redeems us through those. So if we look at Esther's background in her circumstances, you wouldn't expect to find her in the palace as the queen. But Mordecai, that was Esther's cousin who raised her, he was the key player in her getting chosen as queen, because he heard that King Xerxes was looking for a new queen. So he took Esther to the palace and he instructed her to listen to Haggai, to take his advice and do everything that he suggested, because Haggai was the person who was overseeing all the women who were candidates to be presented to the king. And when Haggai met Esther, he was very impressed with her. So he gave her some unsolicited preferential treatment. And Esther followed his advice to a T. If he said do this, he did it. If he said wear this, she wore it. And Esther didn't seek out this favor from Haggai. She didn't do any of the things in her own efforts, but she used wisdom when she was submitting to Mordecai's judgment. And she used wisdom when she was listening to and heeding Haggai's advice. And those things just exemplify God's redeeming ability to grant unmerited favor to those that exercise humility. And that's a lot of what we have to do, is to humble ourselves. Because 1 Peter 5:6 says, humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, And at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. And we see that favor in Esther's story. And because of this favor, we know that God's working. And I don't know if you've realized this, but in the book of Esther, you never hear God's name mentioned. But throughout the story, you can see God's presence in everything. So when we do as Esther did, and we humble ourselves to him and we trust him, we're going to see his redeeming favor in our lives also. And when we let God's power work in us, we're going to see him do more than we could even ask or imagine. And that's a promise that's found in Ephesians 3:20. And Esther becoming queen that's not the end of her redemption story. Because once she became queen, then things for her people kind of went downhill fast. That's when King Xerxes' top most trusted advisor, Haman, started this evil plot. He hated Mordecai. And when Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew, he decided he was going to come up with this plan and get the king to go along with it to just kill all the Jews. That way he could get rid of Mordecai. And when Mordecai discovered Haman's plan, he went to Esther and told her what Haman was plotting. And he told her she needed to go before the king and ask him to spare the Jews. And Esther's initial reaction is probably what my initial reaction would be, and that would be, no, thank you. Because she knew that if she went before the king without him asking to see her, she was going to be put to death. That's pretty much what happened to the queen before her. But at this point, she had not told King Xerxes about her Jewish heritage. He had no idea. But Mordecai let her know in no uncertain terms that if she didn't act and if she didn't go before the king, she and the Jewish people were going to perish. So Esther reconsidered what Mordecai had told her, and she asked him to let all the Jewish people in the land to fast with her for 3 days. And after that 3 days, she did go before the king. And she asked him to spare the lives of not only herself, but the lives of all the Jewish people. And God had already been working behind the scenes, especially in King Xerxes' heart. King Xerxes loved Esther, and he wanted to do anything for her. So he had already decided that no matter what she asked, he was going to do it. So because of Mordecai's urging, Esther risked her life and thwarted Haman's evil plan and was the key player in saving the Jewish people from death. And if Esther had not been chosen as queen, there would have been a totally different ending to that story. But God, those are my two favorite words. But God took a poor orphan Jewish girl and redeemed her life and used her for a mighty purpose. And that was his purpose. And God has a plan and a purpose for your life too. That doesn't mean that his plans are going to line up perfectly with your plans. And his plans aren't always easy. Trust me, because I have had plans in place before. Like I had Bethany's life all planned out. She was going to graduate. She was going to start working as a children's pastor, and all was going to be good. But Bethany did not do that. Bethany came home and decided she was going to go into heart failure and just totally messed up my plans. But God's using that. God is using her, even though going to cardiac rehab was not her favorite thing to do. God used her in that. She was able to witness to the people there. She was able to invite people to church there that may not have been able or may have never been invited before. So even though there's wrenches thrown in our plans, God still uses all that. God's using this. We know that in the end, Bethany's going to have an amazing testimony. And I think about Candace and her story, how she didn't plan to get cancer, but God used that, and what a mighty testimony that she has now. And I know that Bethany is going to have a testimony just like that. And it's all part of God's plan for her life. And he doesn't leave us to figure out our plans on our own, because, at some point in life, we're going to find ourselves at a crossroads, just like Esther did. She had to decide, am I going to risk my life and go talk to the king, or am I going to sit back and let Haman's plan come to fruition? Do you have any examples of different plans that you may have had, or anything like that? Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's okay. It's okay. Even from a very young woman, I was 18 years old. I wasn't expecting to get married. I wasn't expecting to have kids at such a young age. I had a lot of plans in my life at that point that, kind of went on the back burner. Some of it's my own choices. It is my own choices, but as circumstances rolled out in life, but you see the hand of God in all those choices, like some very beautiful things as a result of the choices that I had made, and then allowed God to take control after that. It's when we allow God to take control that I think we really see the hand of God moving in our circumstances. And, I've had different things. All of my kids have had different medical challenges and some different things that they've dealt with. But, God has been so gracious and so wonderful to us. And it's really strengthened our faith as we've walked through these things with our kids. They're not things I would ever choose to do. I'm sure just like, Esther would not be like, hey, I want to go and interrupt the king. And I wouldn't necessarily choose that. She wouldn't necessarily choose that. But some things are necessary for us to walk through. And it's good that God gives us grace, strength, courage, all those things when it's time to walk through those things.
Right. When we look at Esther, and we can follow her example, when we reach those crossroads, when we have to make a choice, are we going to go right or are we going to go left? We look at Esther and we see that she prayed, and she didn't just pray herself. She asked people to pray with her, and she really began to seek God in what to do. And in that, God did show her what her next step should be. God's going to do the same thing for us if we follow that plan. And, Esther had some tough disadvantages in her life. And just like we have our own disadvantages, but those disadvantages, like I've said before, don't disqualify us. God has a specific purpose in mind for you. And we can see, several times throughout scripture that he's got a purpose for us. 1 Thessalonians 5:24 says, the one who calls you by name is trustworthy and will thoroughly complete his work in you. And then Romans 8:28, it says, we know that God causes everything, not just some things, but everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. So God takes those disadvantages in our life and he uses them for your good, and he uses them for his glory to complete his will. In Hebrews 13:21, the writer prays a prayer that we can and should pray over our own lives. Just a question, do you pray the scriptures over your life? If you don't, I strongly encourage you to start doing that. But in Hebrews it says, may he equip you with all you need to do his will. May he produce in you, through the power of Jesus Christ, every good thing that is pleasing to him. pray that over your life. God's going to equip you. God's going to help you because he has that purpose for you. He wants to see you complete that purpose. And for those who've been in any of my studies before have heard me say this, but for as long as I can remember, anytime that I would have a difficult time or going through a tough season, I would always go to my dad. I would ask him for advice, or sometimes I would just go and cry and say, I don't know why this is happening or whatever. But he would always tell me the same thing. He would say, sometimes God allows you to go through these seasons for you to learn a lesson. He said, but sometimes the lessons aren't for you. It's for someone who's watching you go through whatever you're going through. Or it could be because you're going through this, you're going to be able to help someone else going through a similar season on down the road. And that's just another example of how God can use our disadvantages to help others. And, like I said earlier, God's not mentioned in the book of Esther. And sometimes in our lives, we feel like God's silent, like he's not there, but we know he's there. We talk about how the teacher's always quiet during the test. God's the same way in our lives. He's there, he's testing us, he's going to see how we're going to react. And he's in control of our story. And when those disadvantages of life just keep getting thrown in our faces, we know that God's still working, and he's going to continue to guide you in his perfect will and his purpose for your life. Esther trusted God. She trusted him with divine providence and protection and care and guidance. So she knew that he would take care of her no matter what. She knew if it was her will, if it was his will for her to die, if she went before the king, she was okay with that because she knew that's what God's will was. And he gave her peace. And, Mordecai even reminded her, you were made queen for such a time as this. So the things that you may be going through now, it's for such a time as this. And I'm sure before Esther went before the king, she was nervous. She was probably scared. But she didn't let that fear overwhelm her. And she didn't let that keep her from fulfilling God's purpose for her life. And that reminds me of a story in our lives. It was in 2013, and that's when we were living in Southwest Texas, and we were district youth directors. And we had to put all of our trust in God for divine guidance and protection. It was at that time, to say things were not going well for us is a gross understatement. And we were at a very pivotal point in our lives and in our ministry. And in March of that year, I was pretty much at my wit's end. I didn't know what to do. Jason didn't know what to do, but we knew something had to happen. And I was out running errands one day, and I remember the exact part of town I was in. I can still see the buildings today that I was around. And I was having a heart-to-heart conversation with God. I was pouring out all my hurts and all my frustrations about everything we were going through. And I remember saying to God, and probably I wasn't saying it very nicely because I was really frustrated. And I said, God, I am just sick and tired of feeling like we're drowning. And immediately, God stopped me and he spoke these words to me. And he said, do you not remember the story of Peter walking on the water? He said, remember when he kept his eyes on me, he didn't sink. So quit looking at the storms that are raging around you and keep your eyes on me. And it's time for you to step out of the boat and keep your eyes on me, and I'm not going to let you drown. So I went home that day. I picked up the kids from school. I didn't make them stay there all day, but picked up the kids from school. We went home, and I went to my room and I wrote all that in my journal. I didn't share it with anybody. I was just keeping that between me and God at the moment. That same afternoon, Jason had gone to talk to one of our pastor friends and to get some advice. Because like I said, we were at our wits' end. And that same afternoon, Pastor, about the same time that God was talking to me, Pastor Ray looked Jason right in the eyes and he said, Jason, God wants me to tell you this. He says, it's time to step out of the boat and keep your eyes on me, and I'm not going to let you drown. So he got home and he told me that. First of all, I almost fell out of my chair because almost the exact same words. And I was like, wow. So I went to the room, I grabbed my journal out and I took it and I said, read this. And he read it, and those were the exact same words that he had spoken to me at the exact same time on the other side of town. So that evening we wrote our resignation letter and we stepped out of the boat, stepped out in faith without an income to fall back on. We gave up our housing or the house that we were living in, and we kept our eyes on him. He kept us afloat. And eventually it led us here to Kentucky, and the rest is history. And there is some more to that story, but I'm going to share that at a later date. But for now, look at how we had to take that step of faith. We had to trust wholeheartedly in God. And you can see his divine providence and his divine guidance in that story, just like in Esther's story. She stepped out in faith and God's providence was all over her. And when you're faced with a disadvantage or an impossible situation, remember that you have been redeemed and you need to embrace your identity in him and not in the situation, because his favor is going to follow you and his grace is going to transform you. And I hope over the next few weeks that before our next study, that you study more about Esther, either by just reading more in the book of Esther and letting God guide you through that, or if you do get the book, The Her Story Redeemed, you can pick it up on Amazon or at pcg.org. Sorry, little commercial. Get the book. There are lots of questions in there, a lot of them that I didn't even hit on tonight. But dig deeper into her story and let God show you how he is redeeming your story, just like he did Esther's. And as you study, try to think of some circumstances or disadvantages that you have in your life that you want to turn over to God so that he can help you live up to his purpose and live out the plan that he has for your life. So in full transparency, I am doing my best to hand over my insecurities so that next time we do this study, I don't talk so fast because I get nervous and rattle on like the micro machine man. But in all we do, we just need to release those things to him, and he's going to use those disadvantages, use the things that we think are bad. He's going to use those for our good, just like he did for Esther.
Let's see who can overcome their insecurities and turn their camera on if they don't already have it on. We'd be interested to hear from you guys. Bethany is monitoring comments if you want to type in chat, but also you can just raise your hand, unmute yourself. If any of you have ever had those times that you felt like, you know, that you were at a disadvantage, but God stepped in. So we'd be interested to hear anybody that has any of those that'd like to share. Hey, Mimi. I know she's brave enough to unmute herself.
There I am. Okay, I unmuted.
So do you have any times that you could share kind of when you felt like you were maybe at a disadvantage and God just really stepped in?
When we first got married, we were, of course, James had just joined the military, and I had no idea what the military life was about. And so I got involved in what they called the Protestant Women of the Chapel because I was so lonely. And, and I ended up being all the different positions on the board at some point in time. And I did not feel qualified to do that, especially when they put me in as president at one point. And then in Germany, I was like the regional president, and I'd never felt qualified to do it. But I felt like that God, put me in those positions for whatever reason. And it was a lot of growth for me. And you really had to depend upon the Lord to show you what to do, ask his direction. And then even when I took the women's ministry position there in Kentucky, I did not feel qualified for that at all. But yeah, but I did it, and I probably could have done a lot better job, but life happens. You do a lot of stuff besides that position. So, as you know, Miss Teresa, you have many hats, but you do the best you can at that point, and hope that you did, a good enough job. One time I heard someone say, because I always thought I was not a good enough parent, and I heard someone say that you don't have to be the perfect parent, you just have to be good enough, and so that took off some stress on me. It made me, I had more relief in that area. And so you just have to do the best you can, and let God take care of the rest. And he always does. He has no problem with that. So
He does. He's really good.
yeah, he is.
Yeah. And I can only imagine Esther, that she went from disadvantage, like she was a Jew and she had been dislocated, and then she entered into the king's court. And that's a whole nother level of princess kind of thing. And she rose to the point of being married to him, married to Xerxes. She could have not really revealed that she was a Jew. She could have just stayed where she was comfortable. She could have just stayed in her position, because I feel pretty confident if Xerxes was going to do what he did for her with the Jews, he would have done something if he found out she was a Jew to prevent her from dying. So he probably would have prevented her from dying, because he obviously loved her and wanted to give things to her. But she chose to step way out and take a huge disadvantage of going before the king for everyone else. People she didn't know, people that she had no relationship to other than they were Jews too, that she knew she needed to step up for. And there's things that we'll be called to in life or do in life that put us in a really uncomfortable position. And oftentimes, like Becky said, it's just not all about us.
Right.
It's about the kingdom. There's been several things that have reinforced it recently, but it's about the kingdom of God. What we walk through, what we go through and experience in life. And as we surrender and submit to God's will for our lives, it's not just about us. It's about the kingdom. And it's what is bringing glory to the kingdom, what is saving souls, what is spreading the gospel. That's what it's really all about. And even sometimes when that puts us in some horribly uncomfortable positions, God has never fails us. He is faithful, and he always provides a way for us. If you have not put your name in the comments, go ahead and do that now, because we're going to choose a name. Let me see. We're going to definitely choose a name. So we have some names already. We're giving away a chosen devotional. So even if your women's director or minister or whatever, put your name in the comments, because you're going to get a book but you have the possibility of winning a book to give to someone else. So put your name in there. I'm going to give another minute or so.
Hi, my name's Robin, and I just wanted to thank you, ladies. I was a little bit late coming in tonight, but I really appreciated it, especially the story about how your dad, Becky, I think, said that, you may be going through it because someone else needs to see it. So thank you both very much. I look forward to doing some more meetings with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
That's my cousin. She lives in Houston.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
We are, is it intrastate or interstate? We are interstate. So we're going all over the country.
Yes.
You guys remember on the next one, what's the date of the next one?
February 21st.
February 21st at 7 p.m.
Eastern time.
Eastern, 7 p.m. Eastern. You guys invite whoever, like, we don't care. Any ladies you got, please invite them. We would love to have them. We really want to grow this Bible study and we want it to be interactive. So you guys invite them to come. So everybody's had a chance to enter names. So Bethany is going to do the drawing right now with her app. I don't even know what that means, but she's going to do it.
Linda Roberts.
Linda Roberts. You are winning a redeemed, Her Story Redeemed book. I'm not mailing it to you. I'm gonna give it to you. She lives less than a mile from me. So I'm gonna give it to her soon. What did you say?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So we'll be giving this to Linda. We're gonna try to do some giveaways each time we have the meeting. It may not be a redeemed Bible study, but I thought today it would be a great idea. Just FYI, Kate Arth is helping me set up some stuff. She wasn't able to be with us tonight, I don't think. But she'll probably join with us next time. She has joined me as an assistant because I need one. And you may be seeing some communications from her, her sending out some stuff. She's done an excellent job at helping me get some stuff together. We'll be putting out information on all our dates. We hope you guys can join us at the different events, and we'll be getting all the details out to you very soon. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yes.
I'll turn this way so you can see me wave. Bye.